How do married men resist the temptation to sleep with other women? This is a real-life experience that a man has lived, and he is telling it today. As a man that in his past has been subject to give in to his whims at a moment's notice, especially when it came to those that have to do with the other sex, it can be very tough. Frankly, it might be a good idea for every married or attached man to think about and decide before it happens exactly how he might deal with it in the event it ever happens to you. Like I said, in my younger years, if a situation were to arise, I am ashamed to say that I would have not given the opportunity a second thought and gone with my first intention immediately. However, I waited to get married until I was 40 years old, and when I uttered the words, "Till death do us part," one really meant them. I was going to do this right, I told myself. Given that I was truly in love with Kelly, if things were to go my way, we were going to do this right and live to be an old couple sitting in our motorhome cruising the US. Not long after our wedding, an opportunity made itself available, and I was immediately put to the test. This beautiful young woman had come to work for us, and strangely enough, we really didn't get along all that well in the beginning. She had a little girl about 9 years old, and was living with her boyfriend, and had been for about 4 years. This young lady was a Demi Moore clone, and knew she was beautiful. She was very sexual and wasted no time telling us in the office about how a few years earlier her boyfriend before the current one had stopped making love to her. With that, at a slow point during the day, she went on to tell the story about one evening when she was feeling rather sexual, she doses him with a Viagra tablet, and how the evening went on from there. Of course the guys in the office were like, "Niece, why you wouldn't have had to do that with me," some of the single guys were chanting. So a few weeks later, it was she and I working some odd on a Saturday, when she comes in appearing rather upset. As her supervisor, I felt it necessary to ask her what was wrong. She went on to explain how she and her BF were not getting along and that he had moved out with that. I tried to comfort her and tell her he would be back, and that she was the best thing that had probably ever happened to him. After a bit, she seemed to have felt better, and we went on to do our jobs. At one point during our conversation, I had told her that if she ever needed anything that she knew I would be there to help her. She thanked me and said that she knew that. A few weeks later, I get a text message from her asking me to call her. So I did. She went on to explain that she was having trouble with her water heater and asked if I might come by to take a look at it. Thinking nothing of it, I did. Upon arriving at her home, I had been there before. She greeted me at the door in a very slinky pair of Daisy Duke shorts and a cut at the mid t-shirt, and she looked amazing. She led me into the room where the water heater was, and I looked to see that the pilot light had gone out. I quickly lit it for her and no more problem. After I was done, I washed up and met her in the living room. We both sat on the couch. I really didn't feel anything out of the ordinary, as we had been friends for some time, as we all had been in the office. The majority of employees were petty, hot young ladies, as they seemed to be, who fit in the office better than most. Plus the owner was a bit of a lick, if truth be known. As we sat on the couch, we made small talk, and I asked where her BF was. She told me he was hunting again, and thoughts where he always was. As she was telling me this, she seemed to become a bit emotional. She was telling me that she wasn't sure if it was going to work out with him, and she was upset and lonely. I put my hand on her shoulder and rubbed it in a friendly manner, as if to comfort her. She then reached over to kiss me. As I leaned back, she got a bit embarrassed. I told her that I would enjoy nothing more than to help her forget about the world for the rest of the afternoon, and that it would probably be the best time of my life, but that I owed Kelly to be honest, and I owed it to her not to take advantage of her in a weak moment like this. With that, she began to cry. She told me I was probably right, and she kissed and thanked me. For the briefest moment, I thought to myself what a fool I was, but then thought back to my wedding day, and how beautiful Kelly looked in her white dress, and how happy we both were with the future we had in store for us. For the first time in my life, I stuck to my guns and actually did what I thought was right, not for myself, but for someone else. Upon leaving, she kissed me on the cheek again and told me how much she valued our friendship and how much I meant to her. I told her that I reserved the right to come back to this moment in the event things between Kelly and I didn't work. We both laughed. Little did I know that a few years later, Kelly and I would be separated and near divorce. Nonetheless, that day taught me a valuable lesson, and the feeling of pride I got for keeping my vows meant the world to me. It would have been so easy for me to forget everything and spend the day in the sack with her, and it would have been awesome, but it would have really hurt the one I loved had she ever found out. But I wanted to exhibit some level of morality and integrity. Integrity, the quality of being honest. Doing the right thing even when no one is around to see. Morality, the difference between doing right and wrong. And that day, I feel that I did. This is another real-life experience that shows how do married men resist the temptation to sleep with other women.
In my nearly 25 years of marriage, I had exactly 2 actual, confirmed opportunities to cheat on my wife. They were both very different situations, but the thoughts and feelings were identical. I didn't stray during either, and in reflecting, I have some observations. We were in a rough patch during the first opportunity. We had a fight as I was walking out the door to leave on a business trip. Pro tip: never do this. Cancel your trip if you must, reschedule your flight, but never leave the house on a business trip in the middle of a fight. It's a recipe for disaster. I was hurt and angry and left with those thoughts of, well, if she's so miserable, she should leave. I was actually leaving to go to a class for a week. The female instructor was older than me by a few years, but cute nonetheless. It was probably day 2 of the class when she was teaching, and she looked at me and cocked her head just so that my entire view of her changed. Guys, you know, when she shoots you the look. I felt it in my gut when that happened. I honestly had not looked at her that way before then. She was attractive, don't get me wrong, but the thought just hadn't crossed my mind until right then. The combination of the fight before I left and this newfound excitement over someone else taking an interest in me was too intoxicating to ignore. I'd eat lunch with her. I went to dinner a few nights with her. We had a nice time together. I'd see her during subsequent trips in exactly the same way, usually just a few dinners. I visited her at her house a few times, and we had really nice visits. But then, there was that one visit when I said it was probably time for me to go, and we embraced just a little too long and the whole world froze. In that moment, I didn't think about my wife or my children. Instead, I thought of what kind of man I was, what kind of husband and father I was, and what kind of person I wanted to be. And I walked away. It was not easy. It would have been so simple to make the other choice and slip right inside of her life right then, but I could feel the stress that such a decision would have brought with it. I could feel the weight of the decision, and the amount of effort that changing the very nature of our relationship at that moment would have brought. I didn't actually feel that stress until that very moment. Up to that point, we were just friends. But that was literally the point in time where it all could have changed. I was so stressed out driving back to my hotel room, I couldn't sleep for hours afterwards. But I used the time to reevaluate what had occurred and refocus on my family. The second time, oddly, it was probably a decade later, and in yet another class, with another trainer. But the similarities end there. This woman was from out of country. This one was open about her laissez-faire attitude about fidelity in marriage. She was strong. You could tell in her stance. She stood in the front of the training room with a boxer's stance that almost looked comical in her A-line skirt. It was, actually, slightly comical, but it was also oddly endearing. It portrayed an aura of strength and independence, and her attitude towards life matched that aura. She was so different that it was captivating. The company had put us all up for this conference, and unsurprisingly, in order to maximize bulk room reservation discounts, they put us all in the same hotel. We were all in the hotel lounge one evening, all doing what middle-aged office workers do when they are sitting around hotel lounges drinking. It was during those conversations that she revealed her peculiar ambivalence to anyone's view of fidelity in marriage, and as we all departed down the corridor for the night, true to form, she asked me, "So, you want to come back to my room and have sex?" I honestly don't remember precisely how I answered, but it was something about being tired and having some work to do. She said, very matter-of-factly, "Okay then, suit yourself, but you're missing out. See you tomorrow." I wasn't stressed out at all about declining that second offer. In fact, I smiled to myself as I walked back to my room. I had successfully deflected another risk to my marriage, and I felt good about that. I think I may have also thought, somewhere in the back of my mind, I still got it. Whether or not that last part was true is yet to be decided, as she probably wasn't the best judge of character. But these are the things we tell ourselves to mask our own insecurities. Usually, it works. If I were to make some observations about my experiences, I'd have to say that married guys tend to engage in these little dalliances, at least initially, because the woman takes an interest in them. They feel needed. They feel like someone is paying attention to them. They feel validated. And this probably happens in a period in their marriage where they feel as if they are not receiving those things from their spouse. Women should know that appealing to a man's ego is a very powerful thing. But if that man allows it to continue, he knows exactly what he's wading into. But, like me, they probably think they know exactly where that line is, and they're willing to walk right up to it, without any intentions of crossing it. What happens when you actually face that decision, though, is totally unknown until the very point where you face that decision. As is true in nearly every high-stress scenario, one never knows exactly how one will handle that stress until the very moment that one is faced with it. Secondly, as I've already alluded to, guys think they can handle it. They think, I can play around and not cross that line. I can see how far this would actually go, but of course I'd never do it. I wonder how many guys thought exactly as I had in that situation, and then woke up the next day realizing that they actually couldn't handle it, and they allowed themselves to cross that line. And once you do cross that line, you can't ever go back. If you are the kind of person who would do it once, you're the kind of person who would do it twice. The woman's not blameless here, either. Making the moves on a married man takes a special kind of woman. And I mean special in the most negative way you can think of. And guys, think about this: if she's so flippant with your marriage when she's not married to you, how committed to you do you think she'd be if you decided to get with her? It's like Groucho Marx said, I'd never join a club that would have me as a member. If she helped you cheat on your wife, she'd cheat on you just as easily. In my experience, the woman doesn't agonize over this decision as much as the man does. And by the way, all this hooey about remember your vows and think about your wife means absolutely bupkis in the heat of the moment, because I can guarantee you, when the little head is doing the thinking, the big head won't be thinking about your wife. It comes down to you, as a man, and what kind of man you will be. What do your vows mean to you? You made them. Are you going to stick by them? Or does your word mean bupkis? Do you want your word to be your bond? Is that important to you? So to answer the question, men avoid that temptation by being stronger men. It does not mean that you will not be tempted. It's the resistance to the temptation that makes you a stronger man. But it's hard to tell a man, go out and almost have an affair. That's nearly as sacrilegious. But knowing my limits, and knowing I can approach that line without crossing it, makes me a stronger man, more confident that I can actually uphold my vows because they've been tested.